Hey guys, it's me. It's Ethan again. Well, it's been a while since you've heard from me. It's just after the events that happened in that horrible village of Templegate. I needed a week for my mental health because it just brought back some very, very bad memories with me and my wife, and it reopened some old wounds, and so I just needed some time to get away from that. But it's okay. I'm ready to talk about my next adventure that I had about a year after Templegate. And don't worry, I have more adventures, and I will talk about them in time. It's just I want to get to this one first. Well, I feel like I should let you know what happened to everybody after Templegate. Well, with me and Mia, Stars completely understood why I shot and killed Mr. Louts. Because that guy sexually abused children, okay? How could you defend him? And no, not even going to talk about Mr. Louts. Also, when we got home, for the first couple of nights, I was just really happy to be back with Mia. But it was about a week after we got back that I started having these horrible nightmares at night, and I would just wake up crying, and then Mia would just hold my hand and she would just stay with me. She would just have to hug me for the longest time for me to get me to calm down. And it was a hard couple months. It really was. But in April of 2018, Stars officially bought Markov to court over this. And Stars didn't win any money, but the judge said that they have to shut down multiple branches. In fact, they had to shut down almost every branch they had in America. And Mr. Markov, he was not happy about that. And then in June of 2018, I personally brought Mr. Markov to court, and I sued him in damages, and I sued him for $4 million for all the horrible things he did to those poor people and to me. And the asshole actually tried to settle with me. He tried to settle with me. Yeah, but I won. And in June of 2018, he was ordered to pay me and Mia $4 million. And he was also ordered to pay for the 4 people that survived. He had to pay their medical bills. Yep, he was furious about that. And right after court, he said, "I will get you one day, Mr. Upshur. It won't be today, and it probably won't even be next year, but I will get you one day." And yeah, he did eventually get me one day, but that was years after he said it. Anyway, there were 4 survivors, 2 that were found in the basement of the church. Holly, she was that poor girl that was found sexually abused by the cult. They put her in a mental hospital for a couple days, and then afterwards they prescribed her some antidepressants, and her brother and her sister came to go pick her up, and she lived in California for a little while, and she met this totally sweet guy, and she immediately married him, but they divorced, and in 2021, she moved to Ethiopia, And she actually lives about 30 minutes away from my house, by the way. And in 2022, she met her now husband, and in 2023, she got married, and now she has 2 kids. So it worked out good for her, but you can tell, you can just see the depression in her eyes sometimes. She's got some serious trauma, and understandably so. And then there was Jason Michaels. He was the young man that was found in the jail cell. He started getting a lot of infections because the cult didn't believe in modern day medicine. So they just put him in jail for being sick, and they just let him lay there for over a month. Just let him just stay there and just be sick. And he was down there all alone in that jail cell for over a week with hardly any food and water. And when we found him, he was covered in infections and just so malnourished. And he was rushed to a hospital, and he stayed there for months. And his family was there for him when he died about 7 months later. Yeah, but a couple other survivors was one of the devoted cult ladies. We were able to get her into a mental hospital, and with a few months of therapy, she realized that what she was doing with the cult was wrong, but she was still devoutly religious. So later that year, she moved to Texas, and her name was Nancy. And yeah, she still lives in Texas, and she goes to church. And I follow her on Facebook, and she occasionally posts some Christian posts with her and her church friends. And also, there was an old guy that was rescued, and his name was Cyrus, and he actually wrote a book about religious fanaticism and how it can and it does happen in this country. But he actually died about 3 years ago in 2023. He was a crazy old man, and once you got to know Cyrus, he was funny, and I mean funny. He just said the craziest shit, man. And then there was Thomas. He was a tall, strong man with blackish, brownish hair, and he was a hard worker. In fact, after the cult fell, he went to go live with his brother in Arizona, and about a year later, he got a job as a carpenter, and now he has his own house that he built, and he still works as a carpenter. So, overall, the survivors, they're doing okay. A few of them are still alive. Yeah, they're doing okay, and it took a while, but me and Mia, we were okay after a while, you know? Anyway, it was about a year after we started investigating Templegate in January of 2019, and me and Mia were called into our commanding officer's office, Chris Redfield, and he said, "All right, guys, so STARS is investigating something called Operation Manchurian Gold. And it's okay because it's been like 7 years since he told me this, so it's okay for me to tell you now. But we're investigating something called Manchurian Gold. And the reason why we call that is because a strange chemical was found in northern China near the border of North Korea. And it's a strange nerve-acting chemical, and we're not sure what it does. And one of our agents discovered it because he was investigating North Korea near the Chinese border. And we're just not really sure what it does, but we are certain that in the wrong hands, it could be very, very deadly. So, what we need you to do is we need you to fly your drones over Manchuria, and then we're going to get our agents to carry the quote-unquote Manchurian gold into the port of Dalian in China, and then we are going to sail it into the port of Incheon, which is in South Korea, and then we're going to fly it all the way over to America and then Ethiopia so we can experiment on it. And the reason why we can't fly out of China is because we are deathly afraid of the Chinese government discovering this. Okay, so does that make sense? And I said, okay, so me and Mia are going to China? And he said, no, you're not going to China yet. But what we need you to do is we need you to basically use your computerized drones to watch over the operation. Make sure it goes smoothly. Alright, and I'll give you the coordinates for the extraction site where they're going to pull the chemicals from the ground. And so he did, and I gotta say, the Manchurian region of China, it's okay. It's a lot of grassy fields and some rice paddies. It's okay. It's not really that interesting. But, essentially, I just watched some Asian guys and some STARS agents just pull this strange brown box out of the ground. And then they put it in a truck, and then they drove it over to the city of Dalian, which is in China. And then they handed it over to Agent Wong. And then it was my job to basically keep one of my drones in the city of Dalian. And then 2 C-Star agents were going to go get it. And they were Ethiopian, and their names were Joe Miller and Charlie Hannity. Joe was from North Carolina, and Charlie was actually from a seaside town in Ireland. And it was in February of 2019. It was around the time of Chinese New Year that they were going to sail into the city of Dalian, and their job was to meet Agent Wong there, and they were going to just pick up the box, put some oranges over it to make it look like they're trading Chinese cargo, and then put the cargo on the boat that they were sailing, and then sail to Incheon and put it on one of our planes and fly back to Ethiopia. Pretty simple, right? And yeah, that's what I thought too. I didn't think it was really that interesting at all. Well, if it wasn't that interesting, I think I wouldn't be telling this story. So, it was about February 4th that I saw this small Korean tugboat, and it had a real Korean name that I couldn't pronounce. I think its name was like Jungchun, something like that. But yeah, the 2 white guys that were driving it, they probably couldn't pronounce it either. And Joe Miller got off the boat and said, "Yeah, we in China on Chinese New Year. Yeah, we gonna eat us some real Chinese food, ain't we, Charlie?" And he said, damn right, mate. Alright, but I'm excited to try this Chinese beer. I think the Chinese beer is called like Sing Sang, something like that. And we can't forget about sake. You know what I'm saying, mate? Alright, well, I'm going to stock up the boat and see if I can get us some liquor. And yeah, I'll see how this Chinese yen works. And you, go meet Agent Wong, alright? Alright. And I could tell this was all happening because I was watching all this from my reconnaissance drones in my office all the way back in Ethiopia while they were in China. So, they get off the boat, and Joe walks towards some alley that was near some bar in Dalian, China. And might I say, Dalian's actually kind of a nice city. They have a theme park, they have a zoo, and they also have a really cool, like, dragon statue. Yeah, look it up. And that's where Agent Wong and Agent Miller met. And Agent Wong, she's, well, let's just say she's a decently pretty Chinese woman. And as soon as she showed up in her tan trench coat, but she was wearing a red dragon scarf, that's how Joe knew to find her. And Joe, he was wearing, a Sea Stars outfit, which a Sea Stars outfit is basically a dark blue jumpsuit that has like a yellow sea star on the chest. And yeah, that's it. And as soon as she walked over to him, Joe was like, "Hello. So you come here often?" And she said, "No, Joe, I don't come here often. I'm here to give you the stuff." And he said, "All right, but there's a lot of stuff I want you to give me. There's some stuff I want to give you, girl. How about I buy you a drink with my, this Chinese money that Stars gave me to do some shopping here?" And she said, no, that won't be necessary. All right, okay, so if you follow me, I'm going to give you a thick brown box. And I'm going to put it in a bigger box full of mandarin, like, oranges. Not that crap that you buy in those plastic cups, but like real, authentic Chinese oranges. And he said, all right, baby. I love orange. You need any help with that? You need you a big, strong man to help you with that? And she said, no, I've got it. All right. And yeah, by this point, Joe started to see, his southern charm wasn't working. He kind of saw the writing on the wall. And so she got the two boxes, and then she got one of those like a cart, like a push cart, and she said, all right, okay, now let's very discreetly move this to the docks and find out, and then get it on the boat. And then afterwards, it was like Joe started making small talk with Agent Wong, and it's almost as if making small talk and actually being himself actually made her like him. And so they made it to the Korean boat, and then they just got it into the one little room that was on the cargo, that was on the tugboat. And they thanked each other and said, and Agent Wong said, next time you're in China, how about you stand out a little bit more? I'm sure any Chinese girl will be lucky to have you. And he just went gok bagok over that. And then, I probably should have reported these two guys sooner. But honestly, why did Chris Redfield assign these two morons onto this important mission? Charlie came back and said, I got us some authentic Chinese beer and some sake. So, let's go on the Yellow Pebble Beach and let's get wasted, mate. And so they went on the Golden Pebble Beach, which is a real place in Dalian, China. And yeah, they did some drinking. And I was going to tell on them for basically getting drunk on the line of duty, but, I mean, well, these two guys, they were in their very early 20s, and, well, they were in China and Korea, They were in a brand new country, and, after this mission, they probably weren't going to ever get a mission like this again. So I let them enjoy it, although I really, really wish I didn't. Well, it became night, and they were told to leave at night so they could, travel under the cover of night. And so they got back on the boat and started sailing away. Although, when they started leaving port, I could still see them with my drone. And that whole time, Joe said to Charlie, "Charlie, let me steer this boat, man. I ain't drunk." And then Charlie would say, "You owe me 50 yen. What 50 yen? And they started to fight. And I was like, oh my God, these two idiots. But on the boat, they did have a satellite phone where they could call a lieutenant that was stationed in South Korea with stars if things went bad. And so I called the lieutenant that was stationed in South Korea at the time, and I said, "You might want to check on these two guys. Just saying." And he did, and yeah, the lieutenant, he could tell they were drunk. And they said, "All right," she said, "All right, guys, as soon as you drop off the Manchurian gold, you need to come to my office immediately, because this is definitely very not exemplary behavior of stars. That is not who we are. We do not get drunk on the line of duty." And they kind of just laughed them off. And they continued the 300-mile journey in between Incheon and Dalian. And they sailed through the North China Sea for a few hours, and they were a few miles off the coast of North Korea, and they were still sailing towards Incheon, South Korea. But something went kind of crazy. You see, there was the lieutenant got a very frantic call from Joe Miller, and he said, "We need help. We need help. There is some horrible weather. 10-foot high waves. We're in some kind of typhoon or monsoon or something, and there's a leak in the ship. I repeat, there is a leak in the ship." And then he was cut off for no reason. And then the lieutenant tried to call him back, but then he looked on the radar and noticed that the ship was still on the radar, and the boat was still sailing its way towards Incheon. And then the lieutenant called back again, and then this time it was Charlie who picked up and said, "We are getting absolutely pummeled by this horrible storm we're in." But again, the lieutenant that was stationed in South Korea, he looked onto the weather that was where they were sailing, which they were only about 120 miles off the coast of Incheon in South Korea. And he said, "Guys, what weather are you talking about? The wind is barely going 5 miles an hour, and it's a little bit overcast, but you're not in any kind of storm. What are you talking about?" And then a few hours later, it was in the early morning hours of February 6, 2019, and it was Charlie who called back again and said, "No help. All dead, all dead, all dead." And then he hung up. And yeah, the lieutenant thought that was very weird. So he called back, and he called back again and again and again on that satellite phone. But nothing. And then about 10-15 minutes after that, the ship just disappeared off the radar. And yes, the lieutenant was very worried. So in the morning, the lieutenant went to the port of Incheon, where they were supposed to be dropped off at. And he waited and waited and waited all that day. And February 6th came and went, and there was no sign of the South Korean ship, Joe Miller, or Charlie Hannity. No sign of them. So on February 7th, he called STARS headquarters and was very, very concerned. And they waited another day, and still nothing was heard from about those two guys. It was as if they had just dropped off the face of the earth, or were swallowed by the sea. So on February 9th, they started patrolling the shipping route that they were supposed to be sailing on from Dalian to Incheon, so from China to South Korea. And about 110 miles off the coast of Incheon, they found with their sonar radars what could have been the shipwreck. And that's why I was assigned to go to South Korea in the North China Sea. And I'll tell you about that tomorrow.